Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday. It looks like we made it. I'm so stoked everyone's here. I hope you're having a beautiful day. I have an incredible guest for you with an incredible story, and I think it's a story that weaves together the idea of trauma and overcoming tragedy in different modalities. And in some ways, I think the story you're about to hear today will echo through your home, and you will see parts of yourself in this story. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure and excitement that I introduce you to a remarkable individual who has journeyed through some of life's most formidable challenges, emerging as a beacon of healing and hope and transformation. Angela Lerro. She's a survivor, a conqueror, and has come across some of life's biggest adversities like breast cancer, Lyme disease, some mold toxicity, having family members leave her at an early age, and I could go on and on. But I think I would just stop my talking right here and kick it over to you, Angela. How are you doing today?
Hi, George. Aloha. I'm doing really, really well today, and I'm just so honored. And I feel so much gratitude to be able to chat with you, to meet you, to connect with you, and to do this podcast with you and to share my story with so many other people. So thank you so much for having me today. How are you?
Well, it's a great question. Thank you for asking. I'm going to go with fair, and I want to jinx it.
Okay,
It's kind of early in the morning, and if I say I'm
very
doing
true.
good, something could happen. But the signs are showing me that things are looking pretty good today, and I try to always see the glass is half full. I realized there was so much going on in the world. Like, I'm lucky to have a pillow to sleep on, and I got people in my life that love me, and I'm doing something I love, and I'm getting to share stories with people that I think are transformative and can show a path for other people. And both you and I are working on Rand's project Heal, where we're doing our best to try to help people by sharing vulnerable parts about ourselves that are pretty uncomfortable at times, and hopefully it resonates with other people. But that brings me to this idea of trauma, and that's kind of why my personal opinion is that trauma and horrible things happen to you because it's this thing in life where we're tested. And when these things happen to you, the test is, okay, it happened to you because number one, you're strong enough to get through it. And number two, the world needs people to go through these traumas so it can turn around and help the next person through. And you know what, when we talk about trauma in your life, you face some really big adversities in your life. And as we were talking prior to getting started, it started at a pretty early age for you. Maybe you could fill people in on how we began the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before I do, I wanted to actually just kind of piggyback on what you were saying about trauma and how it can really when you go through such adversity and traumatic experiences, how it can really help people get through their own. And I've lived by this quote saying, what you're going through currently is someone else's lifeline.
Mm.
And that for me made the biggest difference, not only my healing journey as a patient, but also as becoming a practitioner, because I never want, and I think that it's like a collective thing that people that have gone through such immense trauma is that we have such deep compassion in our hearts that we've really made it a mission to help others, but also to be their lifeline so that they know that they're not alone, because we know firsthand what that loneliness and that suffering feels like within ourselves. And so yeah, I completely like resonated with what you said there, and I just wanted to state that before I forgot.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's true.
Yeah. But like as we now to answer your question, to go back to where we were. Sorry for that tangent.
It's perfect.
But no, I thank you for the acknowledgement. And but yes, I have been through. I mean, I've just been through through trauma, I guess you could say, through hell,
Mm.
really, and back. Um, Especially like more so over the last 10 years, But really, if I have to look at my trauma as a whole, I've been battling trauma since I was a child. Um, and I really feel that that trauma is what kind of set the bar for the trauma that I've experienced through my healing journey, which I'll talk to you about in, later on.
Yeah.
But no, I grew up in a very emotionally dysregulated home. You know, with a very um intense father who I, ended up losing when I was only 9 years old. Unexpectedly, he passed away. And I was really sick growing up as a child as well. I had mysterious illnesses and weird symptoms. And at the same time, I had a lot of mystical experiences happening that I knew I inherited from my father because my dad was an incredible psychic, an incredible mentalist. He could read people's mind, which was really an art that I just like. I could talk to you about that for
Mm.
hours. I mean, that was one of the most incredible features about him was that we could just like the way that he could read people's minds, and he would make games out of it where we would take cards, and he could go through a whole deck of cards telling you every single number and every single suit that these cards were in. And through his gifts, he gave that gift of intuition and mediumship. And so, like at this early age, between like maybe 3 and 5, I started developing my own spiritual gifts. And so, as I was going through my own health issues um, through those my childhood years, and then losing my father, I felt like not like, yes, I lost my dad, but there was a part of those gifts that were trying to develop, but I didn't have a teacher. And that became very traumatic for me because I not only was I, dealing with the trauma of losing my father, but trying to navigate seeing spirits when you're 4 and 5 years old, screaming, every morning because you see a ghost or a spirit, or you're feeling something or you're hearing something, but you think like that you're going crazy, and it's not like I could so I would sit there and after I lost my dad, I would sit there and try to talk to his spirit. But it ended up becoming such a traumatic time for me, especially as I became a teenager, because I didn't want anybody to know these things about me. So I was really trying to not be the weird girl and trying to find myself as a teenager like everyone else. So, and at the same time, I'm still having all of these health issues, mysterious hormonal issues, and Western doctors were just not giving me any help. And, um, my mom used to joke and say that CVS had my own, or I had my own medicine cabinet at CVS, because all the doctors would do was just, we'd go to the doctor and get another prescription. Oh, that prescription didn't work. We'd go back to CVS and have another one. I mean, I've been living at the doctor's my whole life.
Yeah.
So again, it's just that traumatic of just, and then just the trauma of having going through more and more loss as I got older, and the relationship with my mom changed significantly when she started dating. So it
Mm.
was just like one thing after another. And then eventually, when I graduated high school, I just moved to Los Angeles and went to college out there. And that was, even though it was awesome, it was still kind of traumatic because I left my home. But I made a new home for myself there. And, fast forward 10 years later, at 28 years old, I'm 38 now, I got breast cancer. So then that was more trauma and more dis-ease. But ultimately, that diagnosis of breast cancer, I also was diagnosed at the same time with like an autoimmune disease in my esophagus called eosinophilic esophagitis, which was created by an abundance of like histamine in my body and mast cells. And so I really turned to a spiritual approach because at that point, here I am, 20 some years later of going through medical doctors, medical doctors, medical doctors that led me to this diagnosis of breast cancer. And um, Western medicine was still not working, other than I did get a mastectomy.
Mm.
But after that, everything just started to blow up in my face. And um, during that time, was when I met a Reiki master who happened to be volunteering for my cancer center. And she came over to me the minute I met her, and she just looked at me and she goes, "You know why you're sick?" And I just looked at her and I was like, "No, because I think I'm going to die at this point." And I don't really care why I'm sick. And she goes, "Well, I think you should know that you're sick because you're not using your gifts."
Wow.
And I just remember just like starting to cry because I knew it was like the secret that I'd been carrying around my entire life. And I didn't want anybody to know this. And I'm 28 years old in my cancer center, feeling like I'm going to die. And this stranger, who I just met tells me this. And I said, okay, well, I just never had the teacher. And she just looked at me and she goes, "Well, when the student's ready, the teacher appears."
That's so true.
And I just like immediately just burst into tears. And she channeled Reiki for me that day at the cancer center. And then afterwards, I agreed to start seeing her privately. And she worked with me like no other. She gave me the most beautiful blessing um, that I could have ever asked for. Because at that time, I mean, I was sick, I was broke, I was broken. Um, I had support of my boyfriend, but that was, I didn't have a lot of support from friends or family because I was 3,000 miles away. So it wasn't like I had, family surrounding me. And this woman just was like, "I don't want you to pay me for any of these services," because I didn't have any money. She goes, "All I want you to do is show up and do the work." And I didn't know what that meant. I was like,
Yeah.
I'll show up. I don't know what the work is, but I'll work." And so I showed up every single week at her house. And for over almost 10 months. And at the time, when I moved to Los Angeles, I went to school for fashion and I was working in the fashion industry. And when I got sick, thankfully, I was able to take a leave of absence from my job. But as you know, the fashion industry is very material and it's very like high paced, fast paced.
Yeah.
And I was working with like a high end retailer. And I was doing personal shopping and personal styling, and I was working with celebrity clients. And I was just like, as I was going through cancer, losing my breasts and losing my femininity at this, that's what it felt like. Was losing everything. The one thing that I was finding during this spiritual journey working with her was that it didn't really care so much about fashion anymore. But I knew that I was going to have to figure out what I was going to do next. And after one of my sessions with her, after about 9 months of healing, now, mind you, during that 9 months of healing with Reiki, I reversed every single, like all my allergies were reversed, all my food allergies were reversed, all of my post-cancer symptoms were reversed. My nervous system regulated. I went from being bedridden to walking again. And that was just through the Reiki and the energy work that I was experiencing with her. And I remember coming out of one of my sessions with her, and I remember always setting that intention of like, what am I going to do next once I heal? And I just looked at her and I said, I'm feeling really called to do this work. Like, this is my mission, to turn my pain into purpose. And I just remember we both started crying. And then I started training with her with Reiki. And because during that time, I was working with her as I was healing, it was also because my intuition, it was like I let it out of a box. I let myself get out of this box of like feeling like I was a prisoner, and being able to show up for myself and not be afraid of these claircognizant messages and clairvoyant visions and these, messages that I was getting from spirit. I was able to start navigating them and listening to them and harnessing them. And I started working with angels and talking to angels and divinely receiving these messages. And so once I started working with her with like attuning with Reiki and honoring this, I, it took a while as my attunement, there's several attunements. So I had, Reiki 1, and then I worked really hard just to figure out how to like harness that energy and practice working on people. And then once I got my level 2 attunement, I immediately started my practice. And it was the craziest thing because I had taken this leap of faith to do this professionally, but for personal for personal reasons, I believed in it so much and became so passionate about it. And I my at the same time, my job, like my what needed me to come back, because my I could only take so long off of my leave, so my leave was expiring. And they called and said, well, we have you to start in 2 weeks. And I just remember being on the phone and saying, I'm really grateful that you held my position for this long, but unfortunately, I've taken, another route, and so I won't be coming back. And I remember hanging up the phone, and I was, again, trauma response. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I just jumped off a cliff. What am I doing? I just left the most stable and secure thing that I have in my life.
Mm.
I'm taking this plunge. I'm starting this practice. I don't even know if my rent's gonna get paid. Thankfully, my boyfriend was living with us at the time, but I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? I can't believe I just did this. But I knew in my heart that at that point, I didn't really care what people were wearing on their
Right.
body. I cared more about what people were feeling inside their body. And because I realized that during my own journey, was that all of our health issues stem from emotional repressed trauma. And and that is what dysregulates our nervous system. And if our nervous system is not regulated, if we're not harnessing our truth, if we're not speaking into our truth or speaking into our hearts and feeling our emotions and just suppressing and bottling shit down, that's when dis-ease sets
Mhm.
in. That's when we become dysregulated. And so we create the perfect opening for disease to come in. And so um, once I like took that leap of faith, I remember within 2 weeks, I had a full practice. I was booked every single day. I mean, granted, it was friends, and I just was giving them all like I was like, I don't even know, like, I'm just going to do this donation based. But my friends' donations were monumental when it came to doing sessions with me. They believed in me. They showed up. They drove to me. Some of them drove from like counties away just to have sessions with me. And I was like, okay, like, you know, here we are. I'm here for it. But I remember just that moment in my heart, just feeling like this is right. Like I got such a hell yes in my body that I knew in my heart that this was not coming from a place of like any place other than source. Like this was not
Mhm.
me that was doing this work. This was the universe. This was my spirit guides, God, whatever higher
Yeah.
power is up there, my angels that were just, channeling through me. I'm like, I am not the water. I am just merely the faucet, and I am just being guided to help people wherever where and I'm just being placed. And to this day, I've just said like, place me where I need to help people heal.
Yeah. It's I love so much of the way in which you describe it. Like the part that like there's lots of parts that really ring to me, but the first part that really resonated with me is the idea that you're sick because you're not using your gifts. And when I look around at my life, because truly that's all I can speak to is my life. And
Sure.
when you're not using your gifts, whether that's getting up and going and doing something that you're not proud of, or living a life where you're not giving everything to it, or there's no meaning in your life for some reason, like that's how you get sick because you're constantly lying to yourself and the body keeps the score. The body knows that
Right.
you're doing things that is wrong and it's hard for the body to do it and you're forcing this wrong. It's like trying to shove your foot in a shoe that's way too small for you every day. Like, what are you
Yes.
doing? Put the right side, get a cool pair of shoes and put that on.
You
You
deserve
know,
it.
yeah, yeah, that's so thank you for that. Like, yes. And once you begin walking, you're like, these shoes are way more comfortable. I think I could go for a run. I think I could jump in these things. I feel so much more happier. And like,
Yeah.
like, what is it though? Like, in your opinion, Angela, like, do people have to get broken? Do you have to get sick before you make that change? Like how do sometimes I think like you have to be broken in order to start making that change. And that kind of makes me sad, but I don't know, is that true? Or are there ways to not do it or do it before you get broken? Or what do you think?
Gosh, that is such a great question. Um, you know, sometimes I think the greater the fall, the greater the impact, right?
Yes, that's well said.
um, and at the same time, like I I believe that if people would be more open to hearing others' stories,
Yes.
then maybe they could start looking into themselves sooner, and start addressing some of these deep wounds because we all carry them. I mean, it's just some of us are more sensitive, I think, like I feel that me growing up into this metaphysical home and having these metaphysical physical, I guess you could say, gifts made me a little more sensitive to energies. So the way that my body responded to trauma maybe was a little more heightened than, let's just say, someone else that could have went through the same thing and they didn't experience the trauma the way that I did. So, and that's actually something that I see in my practice is that the people that I started working with, like there was a moment there where I was just working with high schoolers, and a lot of them were like, "I think I have trauma." I was like, "You think you have trauma? I think you probably do." But they really wanted to learn how to access it, and I feel like this younger generation is starting to become more aware of their feelings and they're trying to really connect more to their emotions. Whereas I feel like there's just which is I'm so happy to see that. But there's a lot of like older generations that I have seen, like for myself, and like around my age, it's like we were just taught to suppress things, to kind of like, and especially where I grew up, it was always about like, tough love and like
Hmm.
suck it up and, chin up, it stops crying. It didn't hurt that bad. And it's like, oh, okay. Um, so I think that it's a very, it just, I think that, yes, I think unfortunately, we have to kind of go through our own trials and turbulences before we get to that other side of owning who we are, because it's part of our journey. It's like and it's part of, I think it's also like part of this inner like agreement, right? Like, I don't know if you've like, there's a couple books that I've read and from what I've studied is that we've agreed to our journeys and how my mentor always taught me. She said, we are here achieving our dharma. So what's your dharma? How we get to our dharma is our karma. So whatever karma we have to burn to get to where we are meant to be is just part of our path, so that we can have and carry that same empathy and compassion to help others do the same. So, I would hope that we don't need to go through so much, to heal, to get to where we need to be. Um, but unfortunately, I feel that a lot of us our souls agreed to it before we were born. Um, and so we're here, to evolve and ascend. And this is, how we get, how we evolve and ascend is really up to us, really. We could choose the hard way or we could choose the easy way. And oftentimes we don't know how to choose. The easy way seems so much harder, right? Like the
Mhm.
easy way to me felt so much harder. Like being just out and open and owning who I am was so hard as a teenager. And it's still kind of hard, to this day, just owning who I am. Um and it's part of my journey, but tough, like, but stuffing it down made it so much more difficult. So
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, I agree on so much. And like our friend Zach Flynn and Dr. New are bringing up all these great points about, you know, the way to live your life is to face your traumas and things like that. But you're right. Like what's easy. I once heard a quote that said, in life, if you do what is hard, your life will be easy. And if you do what
Mm.
is easy, your life will be hard. I always kind of played with that on some level.
Wow,
It's
wow,
pretty crazy to
that
think
is
about, right?
so good. Like,
I know.
yeah, just like filled my heart right there. Like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. It's
And
so true. We got to get out
it
of our own
is.
way when it's so hard to do that.
Yeah, I know. Like it seems so counterintuitive to be like, you know what? Wake up and do what you love. But for me, for
Yes,
so long, I'm like, yeah, no one's gonna pay me to do that. No one wants to hear me get up, be a podcaster and make all kinds of money. Like that's not gonna work. And then like you
yeah,
get to a point you're like, why wouldn't it work? You mean this thing where you
yes,
get up and you go do something that you hate doing? Like that doesn't work either. Why don't you try
right.
doing this thing you love? And the more that I look back on that, like all the stories I was told as a kid, like all the mythologies that I loved and all the biographies that I read of people that were like, you know, you can do whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't. Either way, you're right. Like I started looking back on my life and I'm like,
Yes,
why don't I listen to all these things that have inspired me my whole life? Why don't I start doing these things? Like it's in every book that I found myself drawn to. Do the thing you
yeah,
love. Just
yes,
do it. And like you start going down that path and you're like, maybe in the beginning you're like, it's not going to work. But then all of a sudden, like you start seeing these signs. Like I look at the clock and it's always like 4:44,
that's my
2:22,
numbers.
3:33.
444. Those are my numbers.
Imagine that.
444, 1111, and 333 and 555. Like, I don't really see like 222 or any others, but like 444, those are that's my special numbers. That's so awesome. Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes.
fascinating, right? It's crazy to think the way the world will unfold in front of you if you just take the time to believe in yourself and use your gifts. Like you have them. People have them. And maybe those of us who have had life ripped away from us when we were vulnerable, maybe we were more open to seeing a spiritual side. But I think that the spirits are there for everybody to embrace and begin learning about and begin learning a fuller life on some level. Or do you think that's true?
I I completely agree with that. Especially because, you know, so many of us are kind of living really empty lives. We're just filling it
Yeah.
with so much substance.
Yes.
I mean, and these substances are like food, alcohol, distractions, even our phones, right? Like,
Yep.
We are so distracted from the simple things that what makes us whole, which is, our spirit, nature,
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
um, just, good food, nutrition. I mean, like, good people
Yes.
nowadays are
Yep.
just carrying so much toxicity and toxic energy that it's can be even painful just to, like, be around them. And then we're just so lost in our own stews because just the way of the world is the way of the world right now is just leading everybody into an emotional and mental like health crises right now. And I think that we are spending more time medicating and distracting
Hmm.
ourselves from feeling anything, and we're just all we're doing is just emptying ourselves more and more instead of just listening to our spirits and filling our cups and filling our souls and giving our body, mind, and spirit what it truly needs to heal.
Yeah. On some levels, I feel like the on some level, I feel like the curtain is being slowly opened up, and like the light's kind of coming
Mhm.
in. Like when you first wake up, you're like, oh, it's so bright, I can't see. But
Yes.
all of a sudden your
Yeah.
eyes begin to adjust and you're like, oh my God, I have been sick for so long. Oh my God, no wonder that person's like that. You know what happened to them? And no wonder they're horrible to be around because they hate
Yeah.
themselves. Oh my God, I feel so bad
Yes.
for them now. I used to not want to be around them, but now I get it. Like I see their trauma and oh my God, look at their mom. Their mom has that same problem. And you start seeing
Yes. Oh my gosh.
generational trauma, right?
I was just gonna say ancestral trauma and
Yeah.
the lineage of, and I see it even with my clients in my
Yeah.
practice. It's like I'll have a client that comes to me, I know nothing about their family, and then I'll, pick this up, and then they'll say, "Oh, can you work on my mom?" And then I'll like their mom will come in, and I realize that the trauma that I just cleared from them, the mom was carrying that. And I said, "Did you feel that when you were carrying your daughter or your son?" So yeah, I've carried that my entire life. And I was like, "Well, do you realize
Man.
that I just cleared that same trauma from them?" And they had no idea why they were so afraid of this particular thing.
Hmm.
And then I started to think, looking at my own. I mean, every time I
Yeah.
like that comes up, then I start looking at myself, and just because I've been going through a little some other health issues with Lyme disease, I've had to take a break from Los Angeles, and I moved to Pennsylvania temporarily to be with my mom. And I'm seeing now again, like I'll be feeling something, and
Yeah.
then she'll say something out of the blue, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know you thought those things. Like I've been feeling these things, and this is why I feel this way. Yeah, it's just wild how we
Hmm.
are so connected to our own family's trauma, and we don't even have to know what trauma that is. It's kind of like it really makes like it's just mind-boggling because again, it's like we're all energetically tied. We all have these energetic cords within us that connects us to people, to our relationships, to our family. And and it's interesting and it's wild too because I mean, I only had my dad until I was 9, but my mom says all the time, like sometimes she'll tell me like, "You're just like your dad was." And it's like, well, I didn't really even know my dad. So clearly our genetics play a huge tie in our trauma.
Yeah, like I've been speaking with so many storytellers and just doing all these different. I've had this really cool awakening in my world where I've begun to facilitate these cool conversations, and I've been getting to read all these different books, and I started looking back on my family and all these people, all these incredible people that I'm speaking with, and I start to realize how many similarities. Like the words are different, but the story's the same, and it hit
Yes.
it hit me like it's all of our stories, all this trauma.
Right.
That's how you bond with people. Like this thing we call
Yes.
suffering is the tapestry with which we've covered ourselves, and it belongs to all of us. And when you as an individual begin to realize and face this trauma in your life, you're helping to untangle the knot in the tapestry and be like, hey, and you could see it in other people, like, oh my God, that person's going through and so are they. And pretty soon you realize we're just one giant organism. We've been fighting ourselves for so long that we don't know which way is up, but that unravel, or maybe it's not so much of an unraveling as it is a weaving together of like it's all of our stories. Yeah. Death, family members being ripped away, dis-ease, doing something you hate. Hey, welcome to the tribe. Stop,
Right.
welcome. Come over here. Let me give you a hug. I'm sorry. Guess what
Right.
happened? Yeah, that happened to me too. Like, and I think we're
Right.
seeing that, right? Like that's the beginning of healing and the triumph over trauma and this idea of heal that we've been talking about. Right? Do you
Yes.
think so?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, community is everything when you're trying to heal from trauma.
Yeah.
And when, I was in my early 20s, um, I was, I think, subconsciously searching for that and trying to find that community. And I mean, I feel like I'm safe to say this on this
Yeah.
podcast, but,
Yeah.
um, I turned to raving.
Yeah. Nice.
Like, I was a big raver girl, and I had my rave family and my trance family, but I look back on those days and, I did a lot of psychedelics,
Awesome.
and but I didn't do them the right way, but maybe for that moment they were the right thing
Guaranteed.
because it brought me this sense of community because we were all on the same level of all of us were going through through something, that we all had been through something, and that connection, that family, um that bond that we shared that actually made me feel whole. And I think that was like would have been like really the first time that I actually felt somewhat healed was when I was doing the
Yep.
MDMA
Yep.
in that community and in that um that vortex that I was in. I mean, I could have been better at it and healthier at it and made better decisions overall in that situation than some of those situations, sure. But at the end of the day, the community that I have and or that I had, and I still actually, even though I don't rave anymore, but those people are still very much bonded to me and are still very dear friends of mine. And when I was sick, they were still there for me. So they weren't just like, oh, the party friends that just showed up, they were the friends that were there for me, and they're still, I'm still very good friends with them. They're still like my family. And so, yeah, I believe that this community to of healing and these trauma bonds um, are real, and we're just going we all have to go through that process, and we all have different ways of going through that process, especially at different ages and stages in our lives.
Yeah, I think that gets back to what you said earlier in the conversation about like you have to do your own work. Like you can have all the tools, you can have the right mindset, you can have everything, but doing your own work is hard. There's a lot of tears, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of blaming, there's a lot of like self-doubt, but only through that process. It's like alchemy. When I think back to the alchemist, it's like turning lead into gold. And like that's
Yes.
what you're doing with your body and your life. And maybe that's what this process is. Maybe your first 40 years are lead, or your first
Yes.
30, and you're like, okay, how do I transform? I've heard the stories, I've seen people do it. How do I do it? And then you begin your own alchemy, your self alchemy, and like, oh my God, I'm changing. I can see myself change. My relationships are changing. People are looking at me
Yes.
different. It's happening.
Yes. 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 I mean, and part of that, I went through like imposter syndrome for a
Totally.
while there because I'm like, oh my gosh, like people are seeing me in a different light, but I'm also showing up for myself in a
Yeah.
different light. But I don't recognize this version of myself, and I hope I like her. I literally say that
Who
all the
is
time.
this person?
Who is this person? I hope she's cool. I hope she's as
Yeah.
cool as the girl that was in her 20s. And my friends are like, Angela, I think actually she's cooler. she, she's 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 a little more she knows who she is a little more than she did when she was in her 20s. So I hope that she's cooler. I think she's much better.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a minute. Like, part of letting go is watching the change that happens inside of you. And it does feel like death. I know that, like, I know on some
Oh,
level, I was talking to my friend Emil, and he's like, "Oh, I don't like the death metaphor, George." And I'm like, I can't think of a better way to describe it. He says maybe it's an energy exchange or something like that. But I always use this idea of like letting go of the person you used to be so that you can become the person you're supposed to be. But it's difficult to see part of you float away and be like, but I like that part of me. You see, you can physically feel this part of you drifting off, or maybe it's like you're looking back on yourself. But it's a weird position to be in, right? Like, is this person still going to be cool? Is it still going to be me? Like, maybe you could talk more about that. Like, what is that?
yeah, this is such one of my favorite topics, actually. I love this topic because I call it the dark night of the soul.
I love it. St. John
Um,
of the Cross.
yeah, I mean, I know, I didn't make it up or anything like that, but it's a common
Yeah.
phrase. But this dark night of the soul, it is the most painful process. Or there's also that they call the butterfly effect, where
Yeah.
you kind of go into this cocoon phase, and you're just brought into this deep cocoon. And we know that that caterpillar that turns into the butterfly is going through a very, very painful process, right? So this dark night of the soul, where we're just, or this death, this rebirth, is just it's like we're in this state of nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like we're not here, we're not there, we're in this cocoon, we're in this middle part of nothingness, where it feels like nothing is happening, because all we can feel is the pain and the agony and the loneliness. I mean, I experience loneliness. I don't know if everyone else does,
Sure.
but there's even these moments when I was going through. So, like, when I was going through my Lyme treatments and my Lyme disease journey, I wanted to die. I mean, I didn't even feel like that when I was going through cancer, but when I got ill with Lyme, I just remember thinking to myself, like, I just wanted to die. Like, that's just this is too difficult. And I feel that thank God I had my spirit and all the tools that I had to get me through it. But that death was so painful, and that transformation was, but like, I thankfully I had my clients who were checking in on me, and my friends that were checking in on me, that constantly, and my family that constantly reminded me every single day that I was going through this to help other people heal. And I'm not kidding. That's what really for me is, because I couldn't do it for myself, and sometimes healing can be so difficult, and I feel like that's why there's a lot of suicides, because it's just
Mm.
too difficult, it's too painful to face these demons. Because as we all know, like, disease is not just a physical journey, it's an emotional, and it takes us to the depths of our soul that we didn't even know existed within our beings. And we really have to dive deep and go through this, and it's not easy. And so for me, every day I just woke up saying, my mantra was, I turn my pain into purpose, turning my pain into purpose. I don't know what that purpose is yet. I mean, I knew what it was because I was already in my practice and doing what I needed to do to help others, because I was still, I wasn't working much, but I was still seeing clients during the process. But if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have been able to make it, because, like I said, I just, there are times when you just get so, when that dark night of the soul rolls in and that death comes in, it's like, it is the most horrific thing. And I'm just so, so thankful that at the same time that I went through it. It's like the weird, like,
Yeah.
during that time I was like, oh my God, I can't do it every day.
Yeah.
Every day I'm gonna die. I
Mm-hmm.
hate this. Oh my gosh. And then when I came out of it, and I've been coming out of it, and I've been looking back, and I'm just like, that sucked. But that was beautiful.
Yeah.
My whole journey has just been so beautiful and a true gift. Truly a true gift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. I think it's super important to underscore that the dark night of the soul and the feeling of loneliness and the feeling of despair. And I think it speaks to what We Free is saying. Like on some level, we've been conditioned our whole life to see the world with blinders on. And he brings up a good point about media and school and conditioning. And we teach our children, at least in the Western world, we've taught our children to sit in a classroom in front of an authoritarian figure, and that you shouldn't speak up to them, and you have to have these bells and whistles that condition you like a Pavlovian dog. And you sometimes, the smartest kid in the room is scolded for speaking out because something doesn't make sense. And these are all ways we're conditioned, and this all leads to this moment later in life when you have this awakening where you're like, it's all wrong. Like if you don't face that, like I know what he's talking about. Both parents going to work and make it. I get it. Like I did it for so long because I was afraid to look at the alternative. Like this idea that like, yeah, that is all wrong. But the question We Free is this: what are you going to do about it? You're going to keep getting up and going to work and doing this thing. Like, and I get it. What about the mortgage payment? What about your kids? What about your family? How are you going to feed them? Like that level of stress that gets upon you. If you stopped going down the wrong road, you're going to lose. Like I get it. But the truth is, if you keep going down that road, you lose. You have to stop doing all those things. Both parents working, not making enough, stop, just quit, knock it off, find another way to do it, because you know where that road leads. That road leads to a town called nowhere, constant despair, and never living a life worth living. And that gets us back to what I think the dark night of the soul is finally understanding what's meaningful to you and doing something about it. Like that dark night is necessary because that's the soul awakening to the idea of give me meaning. I can't do it anymore. If we do this, we're dying. It's the world telling you you're dying. Do something. Use your gifts. Help people. And that's a good way to do it too, is starting to help other people or starting to look at other people like seeing their despair. That's a window into your despair. The things you recognize in other people, that's a sign of what's wrong with you. I hate that person because they're super arrogant. That's me that's arrogant. That's the world telling me.
Right. We're all mirrors of each
Yes.
other. We're all
Speak it.
mirrors.
Right?
And the things that we don't like in other people are often the things that we don't like within ourselves. And
Yes.
vice versa. The things we love about other people are the things that we love
Beautiful.
within ourselves. And I truly believe that we're all reflections, and we have to, as much as we don't like to look at the bad parts of ourselves, and I hate to break it to you all, but we're not perfect, and we all have some things within ourselves that could be looked at a little bit better, and that's okay. I think people take it really offensively when you call them, when they're called out, or if when you bring that up, that I hate to break it to you, but you have some things that you need to look at. Not many people want to look at it because it doesn't feel good,
Yeah.
and I mean, yeah, no one likes to do that, but it's the work that we have to do to be better than we were the day before, and better for the people within around us, within our circles.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Sometimes you have to be broken. Like I think maybe this gets back to the idea of having to break so that you can be reborn, is that it's so hard to look at. You know, I once heard a quote that said there's two-way people change. One is through inspiration and the second is through desperation. And
Wow.
it's when you're desperate that you're like, okay, I have to change. If I don't change,
Yeah.
I lose everything. Like it's nice to be inspired and it's nice to think that you could read something and act on it. But most people, myself included, have to go through despair sometimes in order to truly understand. You don't know what you have to. You lose it, and then by that time it's gone. But hopefully you won't lose the next one. But it's
Right.
those forces, those two dogs that are fighting inside of you, right?
Gosh. Gosh, that's so interesting that you bring that up, because that was the start of my Lyme disease journey.
Let's hear
was
about it.
was basically, it was that. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Reiki, but the way that Reiki, like with the attunements, is that there are three different attunements. You have your level 1, level 2, and then you have your master and your master teacher. And before I became a master and a master teacher, I had my practice for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And I then, my Reiki master was ready to, I wanted to do it right. I was like, if I'm going to become a master, I'm going to wait until I actually feel ready. Because a
Mm.
lot of practitioners out there, and I talk about this actually in Rand's book, is that they want to rush their attunements, their certifications. And it's like, do you feel really ready to be a master or a master teacher after only being in practice for 6 months and, or 3 months or whatever? It's So I really wanted to own my practice for a while before I even stated that I was a master. And not that we are ever, this journey of life is self mastery, but
Right.
before I got my certification on paper, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
um, so I ended up getting that done, and having getting that certification, taking that, the courses to become a master and a master teacher. I like a week later, I had to have a major surgery because after I had my gotten my breast implants from having a mastectomy from having breast cancer, those whole 5 years, I was having a lot of weird pain in my left shoulder in
Hmm.
this area. And I mean, now that I know what I know, I should have never gotten implants because of the black box warning, but that's a
Mm.
whole other story. Um, but I started having all these like this weird pain, and it took them 5 years to figure out that my subclavian artery and my brachial plexus nerve was being compressed between my cervical rib and my clavicle. So, um, I had finally gotten a diagnosis of a thoracic outlet syndrome, and so I thought, okay, great, I'm just gonna go in, I'm gonna get this rib removed. I can go back to my Reiki practice and go back to my life. And to be honest, like I was also living in a water damaged home that we
Mm.
didn't really understand, or like I didn't understand like there was actually major issues with that. I didn't think I was getting sick, um, and then but like my relationship was also quite stressful and traumatic. And so I had this surgery, and they accidentally like punctured my lung during the
Ooh.
surgery, but they didn't know that they punctured my lung. So I was in the hospital. My lung collapsed. I almost died on the operating table because I only had so many more minutes before um, my heart like went into cardiac arrest while I was on the operating table, and so they had to keep me under anesthesia for a very long time so that they could keep my heart stabilized. But we didn't realize like until the next day after the surgery that my lung had fully collapsed. So I had maybe like 15 minutes or 30 minutes to live, and they were rushing me up to the ICU and giving me a chest tube, and I was in the hospital for 10 days. And after that, I got home, back to I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and I couldn't stand up longer than a minute without passing out. I couldn't walk. Um, and it got worse and worse and worse. Um, it was very, very scary. And this was in April of 2019. Um, I started having like all of the symptoms that I had worked so hard at putting into remission, like all the allergy stuff, um, all of the things that I had dealt with post cancer were all coming back into play. And the worst part was that my Reiki master moved back to Brazil,
Mm.
and she was just diagnosed with leukemia. And I'm like, okay. And I'll never forget this. And then she sent me this message, and she said, Angela, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. But when the master is ready, the teacher disappears.
Wow. Wow. I never heard that before.
And I just remember being on the phone with her, and I'm just like, I'm not a master. She goes, well, you got the certification on paper. It's now your turn to complete this mastery. And like with this,
Mhm.
whatever, we didn't know what it was, what was going on. She's like, it's, it's time for you to become your own self master. And I'm like, I don't even know. Like, this is like another level. Like, every tool in my toolbox was gone. I'm like, I'm
Mm.
owning my gifts. I'm speaking my truth. I'm doing all of the right things. I'm eating the best diet. Like, I can't even stand up, and it's all this, and I'm thinking it's this mechanical error. It's
Mm.
mechanical error, but like in my heart, like I knew that this was leading me down. I knew something was like it was leading me down to this path, because after that, like shortly, um, I started getting diagnosed with every neurological condition under the sun.
Mm.
My relationship with my boyfriend was falling apart. um, I couldn't work. I could barely work at this time because I couldn't stand up. Um, I couldn't eat. I was reacting negatively to everything. Like, here I was plant based, paleo, plant based, low histamine diet, like doing all of these things, thinking I'm like, I'm not getting well. Like, and I just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And ultimately, it led me home because my boyfriend and we broke up. He broke up with me. It was we were just in two different places, clearly within our lives. He was going through a negative space with himself, and we were both kind of like, we either have to jump ship, because if we stay in this boat, we're gonna sink. So um, I ended up, renting out. I had, I also additionally, and with living with him, I had an apartment that I was renting out. So I had to find another tenant to rent out my apartment. And I went back to Pennsylvania. Like, in my heart, I also knew that there was a reason why I was not getting any answers anymore in California. And so I came home because my mom was having a knee replacement surgery. And I offered to be there to help her, even though I was so sick at this time. I didn't even know how I was going to help her when I couldn't even help myself.
Mm.
But I had an old neighbor check in on me to see how, if I made it home or not. And I happened to be going into another anaphylactic reaction from a meal that I had cooked. And he started talking to me about Lyme disease and getting, checked for it. And I said to him, I'm like, how is that even possible? I've lived in California, for the last, 18 years at that time. So at the time I was 30, I was 35, 36. And he's like, yeah, but you were born here. And he's like, it doesn't, he goes, and you just, we're in a traumatic relationship. You just had a very traumatic surgery. Lyme is an opportunistic infection. And if you were living in mold, that activates it. Your immune system was low. It created a perfect storm. It definitely could have reactivated or just activated. And he's like, and it's killing your nervous system. And so after a long month of fighting, I finally went and found out that, yes, I actually had Lyme disease and co-infections, Babesia, Bartonella, mold toxicity. I got my answers. But then what I found out during that process was I actually had it my whole life. My whole life. That was what was causing all of my mysterious health issues from childhood. And then that was actually the breast cancer was the symptom of Lyme disease. And it all made sense. I'm like, I had to go to the root cause, the root emotional, spiritual cause of my Lyme disease was in my roots, Pennsylvania. So I'm living in the house that I experienced all of my trauma from the get-go, from the early on. And so as I've been healing myself through this journey of Lyme using all of my alternative therapies that I've been, doing within my practice, I have been working on the generational ancestral trauma with my mom and spiritually with my dad, because I truly believe, as I always say, we have to get to the root, and that's not just a physical disease; it's a spiritual, disease. So, so here I am, healing myself, literally my mind, body, and spirit by being here, and really healing that generational trauma, which is helping me, get through um, this, this infection, this disease. And, I'm really grateful to share that I'm not showing positive for any types of infections in my body anymore. I still have the inflammation that the body is still holding. It's like the Lyme is the fire, so the fire is out. So now I'm just healing the damage that the fire caused right now. But it's just been such a deep, dark journey of having to be here after 18, like now it's been, I've been out in LA like 20 years, but to be here healing from this and going through these multiple dark nights of the soul and the trauma and reliving it, like it's been one of the deepest, darkest journeys. And ironically, all my friends that I grew up with, like they're still here, but they have families and they got marriages and they have kids. So as a kid, I never really faced my trauma. I ran from it. My trauma release was calling up friends and being like, oh, let's have a sleepover. Let's go out. Let's go do this. So I never really sat with it. And so now all my friends, they're busy, they got their own lives. So the only person I really have is my mother. And that, is the relationship that I'm healing right now the most, is me and my mom, and the trauma that we went through together, losing, my father, but also the trauma that I went through with her when she was going through her own healing process, because I didn't really have her back then, but now we have each other now, and we are, healing a lot of our ancestral and our, that energetic tie. Because like, had I not maybe got Lyme, like maybe we wouldn't have had this opportunity to heal this wound, this deep wound that we've had and we've been carrying for quite some time.
Yeah, it's amazing to think, if you look at it on a larger, if you zoom out on the x-axis, or if you look at it on a longer timeline, sometimes we're called back home because the events that are about to unfold in our life are imaginable but scary to think about. I always think about when I'm being called somewhere, like, hey, I might have to do this, and like, okay, what does that mean? What if I'm feel like every ounce of me is pointing back to this place where I came from, and like I've been not heeding that call, and then you start losing things. You're like, listen, the world's trying to tell you something, and you can wait and put it off, or you can listen to it and start reacting to it. And I found that if you put it off, it calls to you until you answer, and that call gets louder and violent and crazier. So if you can just listen to the voices, however it is you want to describe the being, the world, nature, God, however you want to describe what's talking to you, listen to it, because it's meaningful, and your life will be more meaningful. Which brings me to another point, Angela. Maybe, isn't it interesting that sometimes the people we lose, our relationship deepens with them, even though they're no longer here with us? I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to that for a minute. I got to shut off my camera for 1 minute, but so carry the conversation for a minute while I fix this thing. Maybe you could speak to that for a moment.
Oh my gosh, I love these questions that you're asking me, because like these are questions that I just love to talk about. So absolutely, when I truly believe that when our loved ones cross over, we are still, like you said, we're very connected to them. Um, and I went through a very rough period when I lost my father. How, like, I think I went through every emotion that you could think of towards him. I was angry at him, but I loved him. I hated him, but felt like I still needed him, and I didn't really know how to access him. And I feel like a lot of people might relate to that when they lose people that they really love, especially when when it happens so unexpectedly and you don't get to have that spiritual, emotional, or physical closure with them. Um, but something that I have really like um, learned to do during my illnesses was to start connecting to my dad. And even if you don't have like a loved one that you crossed over, that has like crossed over, you can still learn how to connect with angels and your spirit guides. But there is a special bond. I'm going to speak about him because there is a special bond that I have with him now that I didn't really have before. um and I feel like now when I speak to him or communicate with him, like he shows up in ways that makes me know that it's him. Um and I know that he has shown up for me in ways but before. And if I look back on those ways before, I could see it now, but at first I didn't. But there are so many things that you can, like, for example, like numbers.
Yeah.
My dad's numbers for me are 555. Like, so whenever I see 555, I know it's him saying hi. Um, there are certain things that I can, like, I'll dream about him and we'll have some really nice talks. Or even sometimes, just because I have developed a lot of like my clairaudient gifts. So I can hear him now. So if I need to speak to him about something, and I'll just sit down and say, okay, I'm open to receiving your messages, Dad. Just this is my issue. Like, this is what I need to, like, I need your support in this. I need you to help me. And like having, just knowing that he does hear me. And sometimes it takes him a minute to get back to me because they're busy over there. I've learned that if I really need him, I have to make an appointment. But the relationship has healed tremendously. And he, just because he might be gone physically, and I've lost other loved ones since then, but they all show up. And I tell you, when I did feel that loneliness, and the loneliness wasn't like, no, it wasn't like nobody checked on me or nobody talked to me. It's that loneliness of like, I'm going through something major right now and I don't know what's going on with my body. My body feels like it's been, kidnapped. It's kind of like I don't even know. You don't even know how to explain your symptoms when you have Lyme, because it's not your typical sickness feelings, and you look fine the whole time. So, like, it was hard for me to look at myself in the mirror, and some days I would look really sick, but some days I'd be like, "Well, I look okay. Why do I feel so terrible? Why can't I stand up longer than 5 minutes? Why can't I, why?"
Mm.
And sometimes I would experience like 15 different symptoms within a matter of minutes. And that's where that loneliness comes from, is just having these painful experiences, not being able to explain them because you've never felt them before. And it's really hard to describe unless you've gone through Lyme. Um, but to feel like it's also taken away every bit of joy in your life, that having those loved ones that passed over, um, really, like, that was the only thing I could really truly feel, is that their heavy presence and their energy that would comfort me. And that's why I think that we if we could just all tap into that other realm, we'd realize that we're really never alone. And that energy from whether it's nature, your angels, the divine, whether it's past loved ones, it's truly there. um it's just that we have to kind of take a step back and just sit with it and allow it to embrace us.
It's really well said. I think it's Carl Jung who said that there's things in your life that you can't learn, they can only develop inside of you.
Oh
And
gosh, you are hitting it with the quotes today. I'm like, oh, that was breathtaking. That was so good.
yeah, it's like I think we're, we've probably lived through some, and so too is for everybody listening, whether you're Zach or you're We Free or you're Dr. New, like so many people that are magnetized and pulled towards us, or because they've been through the same things. But this idea that some things can't be learned, they can only be developed inside of you. And that for me, that was like learning to sit with the uncomfortableness of loss, pain, you know, you know, self-awareness, self-love, self-respect, the self, like sitting with all these negative traumas is like, it's really hard to do, but it's the only way to thoroughly understand the quote, this too shall pass. You must first sit with it, right? Like, and it's
Right.
hard. Like, I don't want to think about this right now. And I was having a conversation with my wife yesterday about some tough things. And we just sat there and she's like, look, George, you just got to sit with it. I'm like, gosh, she's so right all the time. And you just sit down with it and hold it and embrace it and be like, yes, that is true. That is horrible,
Yes.
George. And you did it. And how you feel? What's the point of that? Don't do it
Yeah.
anymore. But all those uncomfortable thoughts, if you push them away, they cause blockages, they cause pain, they cause interruption. Just sit with them and like hold them. Be like, yes, damn it.
Yes.
Yep. I did that.
Yes.
I'm sorry
Yes.
for that. And then pretty soon, it's like the bully that's poking you. Like, so are those thoughts. So those keep poking you until you just sit with them, and then they'll get bored and then they'll leave you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you have to learn to
Yes.
sit with that pain. It's hard.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so funny. I just saw a quote today. I actually just posted it on my
Yeah.
Instagram. Was it was by Rumi.
The
And
Sufi
it was like,
poets say it best.
and he said, the cure to the pain is sitting in the pain.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was just like, I have to post this because
Mhm.
this is just, it's everything. I truly believe, like, we have to sit in it. I like something I tell my clients, I say, like, sit in your squat, because squats are painful to me. When you feel like you that you want to do something based on a past behavior or based on a trauma response, or just something that's like a quick fix that's you think is going to help you,
Mhm.
like, I want you to sit in your squat, like, sit in there, build that spiritual muscle, build that spiritual strength, that you no longer have to access those thoughts or those behaviors, that your behavior is just sitting with yourself
Yeah.
in that pain, so that you can rise above it the next time that pain gets triggered within you.
Yeah. It's becoming aware. Self-awareness is such a huge,
Self-awareness.
right? It's huge.
Oh, huge, huge. Reparenting ourselves,
Mhm.
huge. Inner child work, huge.
Mhm.
Because, you know, we are so many of us just walking around asleep and not aware, not aware of their energy, not aware of their power, not aware of what they are, and like, it's just, yeah, we don't there's so many people that just like to just project their stuff like parasites all over other people. It's
Mm.
just, oh, yes. I'm like, self-awareness. Own your truth.
Mhm.
Own your shit. Sit in it. Be with it. Let it go.
Yeah. W What do you think are some of the real big takeaways? I mean, we've covered a lot, but is there something that you could leave the people with that without giving away too much of what we've written in the book, that maybe you could leave people with, that you've learned from your traumas, that is something they could begin thinking about today that may help them on their journey?
Oh my gosh. So much. I'm trying to let me give me a second
Yeah,
to
well, we've covered quite a bit of it. We try to
yeah.
dance around. I don't want to give away too much of what the book is, and I think we did a good
Yeah.
job at dancing around it because there's still so much to talk about. But you've had a
Yeah.
unique journey. Is there
Thank
what
you.
like and a unique way of looking at it, a unique way of fighting it, a unique way of using your gifts to make a better way for yourself, and it set example for people. Like, what else could you leave people with?
Yeah. It sounds this is what's coming to me right now,
Yeah,
and it's something like it's another quote that I lived by,
yeah,
and it's a simple quote. It's do it afraid. And I say, and it's so simple, but it's like do it afraid. Do it. It's scary. But what you need is to get overside on the other side. When we get out of our own way, when we get over the fear, we have nothing but love and light. And I hate using that. I know that sounds so like,
it's
love and
beautiful.
light, but
Yeah,
really we only carry two vibrations. Love and light, love and fear. And when we are going through fear, we carry this lower vibration. And when we carry love, our vibration is higher. When our vibration is higher, disease can't set. And so, if I can give any advice, is, regulate your nervous system, be open to healing, and be open to looking at the dark things that may scare you. Start there first. Start with the darkness. It'll lead you to the light, but we can't get to the light if we don't face our darkness. And also, make sure that you are really like allow yourself to be vulnerable. I think vulnerability is also another key thing
yeah.
that comes with healing. And you know, even make sure that your diet's right, because and that's a whole other topic I can talk about, just with being a carnivore. I eat
Mm,
meat. I'm a carnivore. I only meat, salt, and water, and I love it. I do it because it's helped my body heal in tremendous ways. But it's amazing that I get a lot of crap for it in the spiritual community, because everybody's so pro plant based. So the other big thing was like, don't be afraid to take a chance to question the norm, because this journey is all about you finding your spirit, even if it scares the shit out of you. And like things that wouldn't be that, even if things aren't accepted, like question it, question everything you've been
mhm.
taught, question, what's the science says, because honestly, there's no scientific study when it comes to knowing yourself other than truly diving in and learning who you are, and having this, and not being afraid, and letting go and surrendering everything you have to your healing experience. That's going to help you thrive rather than just survive.
I love it. I love it. I don't think I can add anything to that. It's wonderful. Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, go down to the show notes. Check out Angela. Be ready for the new book, Heal, that's coming out. You're probably going to hear a lot about it. There's a lot of people involved in it, and everyone that is involved seems to have a unique journey where they found a different modality to heal themselves. Shout out to Dr. Randall Hansen for putting it all together. Super thankful for everybody participating in this, and I hope everybody that got to listen today is able to find something to take away. I'm super stoked to have everybody here. And thank you so much. Go down to the show notes, check everything out. And I will be back next week. And go check out all the links, everybody. That's all we got for today. Aloha.
Thank you so